Welcome to the Allison Knows podcast.
Great to be diving into this.
Yeah, absolutely. Today, we're really digging into some fascinating material inspired by Alison Beckford's work, The Rogue President, and also some really interesting notes from April 29th, 2025. Our mission today is basically to unpack what these sources tell us about the shifts in, societal norms, the strains we're seeing on democratic institutions, and of course the big one, the impact of digital talk on political division.
It's like trying to get a map of the current landscape, isn't it? These sources seem to offer some critical coordinates.
Exactly. Think of this as your shortcut, maybe, to understanding some really crucial stuff that's going on. We'll look at how things have changed, why it matters, and maybe some of the surprising consequences Beckford and these notes point out.
Getting beyond just the daily headlines, you mean? Looking at the deeper currents?
Precisely. So let's jump in. Beckford kicks things off in The Rogue President by talking about a kind of perfect storm, a mix of factors leading to the current, chaos. What are the main ingredients in this storm she describes?
Well, what's really striking is how she connects everything. She starts with this idea of a seismic shift in norms and values.
Okay.
And it's not just like people disagreeing, it's growing polarization, and crucially, this breakdown of trust. Trust in institutions, trust in each other almost.
Yeah, that feels very real.
Which creates this us versus them thing, right? It makes finding common ground incredibly difficult. Like the foundation for just talking things through is kind of shaky.
That division, it really does feel pervasive, doesn't it? Like we're all stuck in our corners.
Yeah.
And technology, the way we get information, that's playing a big role here too.
Oh, huge. Beckford really emphasizes social media and the 24/7 news cycle. She argues they basically turbocharge misinformation through echo chambers and filter bubbles. These online spaces tend to amplify the more extreme views. You end up mostly hearing stuff that confirms what you already think.
Right, so you never really encounter challenging ideas that might make you, reconsider. It just reinforces your own bubble.
Exactly. And nuance just gets lost. Complexity, forget about it. It's all amplified, simplified, and often, wrong.
And Beckford ties this into the economy too, right? Discontent there fuels this.
Definitely. She points to economic uncertainty, growing inequality. These are major drivers of discontent. When people feel insecure or like the system's rigged,
They lose faith.
right, they lose faith. And that economic anxiety, it often gets channeled into political anger and polarization. It creates fertile ground for, division.
That makes a lot of sense. If you're struggling or you see huge unfairness, trusting the system gets harder. And you might look for more, maybe radical answers.
Yeah.
She also brings in global factors.
Yep. Geopolitical tensions, shifting global power. That adds another layer of volatility. Things happening internationally don't stay international anymore. They feed back into domestic politics in often unpredictable ways.
So it's this massive combination, society, tech, economy, global politics, all swirling together. And Beckford says this isn't just like a normal political cycle. It's a tempest threatening our foundations. We're on a roller coaster ride. That sounds pretty intense.
It does, and the April 29th notes seem to echo that. They talk about a time of real flux where the old rules just don't seem to apply in the same way. It's presented as a pretty fundamental reshaping, not just minor turbulence.
Suggests we need to be, more adaptable.
Yeah, maybe more resilient in how we navigate it all.
And it definitely feels like the unwritten rules of politics, how people used to engage.
Yeah.
That's changed drastically. Beckford says respect for opposing views feels like a distant memory in this hyperpolarized environment.
That's a really crucial point she makes. The sources suggest a serious decline in those norms that used to, grease the wheels of political interaction, even between opponents.
Like basic civility.
Yeah, and things like accountability, ethical conduct, they almost seem quaint now to some people, which raises a huge question, doesn't it? Is there even a shared understanding left of what's right and wrong in public life?
It's worrying when those basics seem to be eroding. This blurring of lines. It's not just politicians, right? Authority and influence seem fuzzier everywhere.
Exactly. Beckford talks about unconventional forces challenging the old hierarchies. It's a cacophony, she calls it. It's not always clear who really holds the reins anymore. And the notes mention how the digital world is changing governance and diplomacy too, creating new power centers outside the traditional structures.
So new players, new rules, maybe no rules sometimes. And unsurprisingly, this seems to lead to more conflict. Beckford talks about discord and strife.
Yeah, these deep divisions, they create friction everywhere. within communities, between nations. And as we said, the digital world often makes it worse, algorithmically feeding that us versus them feeling in social media echo
It's
chambers.
like we're getting walled off from each other online, just hearing our own side reinforced,
Mm-hmm.
which makes understanding, let alone compromising with, the other side almost impossible.
Precisely. And the consequences, as Beckford points out, go way beyond just politics. It's a ripple effect.
Right. She says it hits the economy, people's jobs, education, healthcare, community ties, even international relations. It's not just about who's in charge, it affects daily life.
And thinking globally, the notes really underline how instability in one major democracy can impact alliances, trade, diplomacy, everything. It can even create openings for more authoritarian regimes to gain ground. The stakes are pretty high.
Okay, let's really dig into this powerful image Beckford uses, the volcanic temper unleashed. She starts with these early rumblings, small things that trigger bigger problems. What kind of things is she talking about?
Well, what's insightful is how she shows these seemingly small things, maybe an off-the-cuff remark, an unexpected policy tweak acting like catalysts.
Like warning signs.
Exactly. Little diplomatic spats that blow up, policy shifts that break with tradition. She calls them proverbial tremors
Yep.
before the seismic events. It's like pressure building up.
So a minor diplomatic row isn't just a minor row. It could signal something much bigger brewing underneath.
That's the idea. And these eruptions on the world stage, as she puts it, have real effects. Alliances get strained, adversaries see opportunities, diplomats are left scrambling to recalibrate in this unpredictable environment.
It paints a picture of a really unstable, reactive international scene. And this volatility wasn't just global, it was inside the government too. Beckford describes the West Wing atmosphere as like walking on eggshells.
Mm-hmm. The sources depict this really tense environment, staff being super cautious, navigating power dynamics, always sort of waiting for the next tremor, the next unpredictable outburst or decision that could shake things up.
Wow, you can imagine the stress and the potential dysfunction in that kind of atmosphere. Then Beckford mentions staff tell-alls. What do those reveal?
Well, these are usually firsthand accounts, right? They give you this raw inside look. They might reveal secrets, power struggles, the raw emotions behind big decisions. It's the human side of high-stakes politics.
Like peeling back the curtain on the drama. And then there's the whole "you're fired" phenomenon. What does that pattern of abrupt dismissals tell us?
Beckford presents it as more than just staffing changes. It becomes symbolic of a kind of volatile, maybe even arbitrary authority. It creates instability, maybe even fear among staff. Each firing sends ripples affecting governance, public confidence. It suggests a very centralized, maybe impulsive power dynamic.
It definitely suggests loyalty might be valued very, very highly, maybe above other things. And what about the feuds and fury spilling out in public?
Beckford observes that when these personal clashes go public, they just fuel the partisan fire even more, and they erode public trust. Behind the scenes, these are often about raw power struggles with little room for compromise.
So personal conflicts actually get in the way of governing.
It seems so, and she even mentions midnight rages, these intense late-night arguments behind closed doors. What's the significance there? They become sort of emblematic of a certain leadership style, according to the sources. Intense debates, high pressure, raw emotion, maybe decisions forged in the heat of the moment, not always through calm deliberation.
Right, not exactly a picture of cool, rational decision-making all the time. Which leads to the question, how do you even manage this? Beckford talks about moving from chaos to control. What does that take?
The sources suggest it requires, well, several things. Understanding the triggers for these outbursts, first off, then clear accountability, and really crucial, open communication to try and diffuse the tension and, get back to problem solving.
So a conscious effort to bring some stability back into a very reactive system. And what are the big picture lessons in leadership, or maybe the lack thereof, from all this?
I think the sources really emphasize that effective leadership, especially in rough times, needs things like listening, learning, adapting, a reasoned approach, not just reacting emotionally, and ethical leadership integrity, commitment to the common good that's presented as absolutely vital for trust.
It really does hammer home those fundamental leadership qualities, doesn't it? Especially when things are chaotic.
Absolutely. And before we shift gears, just a reminder to everyone listening, if you're finding this deep dive into Alison Beckford's work useful, please do like, subscribe, and share Alison Knows on Spotify and YouTube. It really helps us keep these conversations going.
Yeah, please do. Okay, let's pivot now to the digital world's role in all this. Beckford calls it navigating the digital deluge. A big part of that is echo chambers. How do they fit into the picture?
Right, we touched on this. Echo chambers basically filter your reality, showing you stuff that confirms what you already believe and hiding dissenting views. And the challenge, as the notes point out, is that getting out of them takes real effort. You
Yeah.
have to consciously seek out different sources, different perspectives.
It's just easier to stay in your bubble, isn't it? You have to
Ah,
actively decide to step outside. What about sensationalism? Beckford says sensationalism sells.
yeah, the media environment, the
Yeah.
pressure for clicks, for speed, the 24/7 cycle. It often incentivizes prioritizing impact over accuracy. Sensational, outrageous stuff gets amplified, even if it's not totally solid factually. Nuance gets sacrificed for
The
eyeballs.
more shocking, the more clicks, basically, regardless of truth. And comment sections online.
Mm.
Beckford says that's where facts get frenzied.
Oh, yeah. They often become these digital battlegrounds, right? Facts, fiction, opinions, insults, all mashed together. Anonymity emboldens some people, and it can just become this hostile environment where misinformation spreads like wildfire.
Definitely not always the place for reasoned debate. And this fuels what Beckford calls the rise of viral outrage.
Exactly. Sensational stuff spreads fast online, fueling this outrage culture. And that heightened emotion, it can actually get in the way of critical thinking. People react quickly, based on incomplete or biased info designed to push their buttons.
And it's not just random users doing this. Beckford highlights the role of influencers in spreading fury.
Right. People with big followings have huge power to amplify emotionally charged stuff. They can
Mhm.
really shape sentiment, sometimes making polarization worse, spreading things designed specifically to provoke anger or fear.
They have a massive platform and, well, maybe not always a massive sense of responsibility to go with it. And the sheer volume of 237 coverage adds to this, too.
That constant flood of information, it keeps us wired, maybe, but it can lead to a really shallow understanding. There's just too much to process deeply. It can be overwhelming, lead to fatigue, maybe even cynicism.
Feels like drinking from a fire hose sometimes, hard to know what's important. Hmm. So given all this, how hard is it to actually moderate online content? What are the challenges?
It's immense. The sheer volume is one thing. Anonymity makes accountability tough. Then you have the algorithms themselves, which often boost engagement, even if the content is harmful. And when influential people are spreading problematic stuff, moderation becomes incredibly complex technically and ethically.
A massive headache, basically.
Yeah.
Beckford also mentions meme warfare, using humor as a weapon.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Memes are so shareable, so simple. They can be really powerful political tools. They often oversimplify things, which can be great for spreading a message quickly, but also really effective for spreading misinformation or stoking outrage disguised as a joke.
Funny how something so seemingly trivial can be so potent. So how do we move towards constructive conversations in this digital mess?
The sources suggest it takes a conscious shift, like actively avoiding polarizing language ourselves, practicing active listening, trying to understand why someone holds a different view, not just shouting them down, cultivating empathy, being open to diverse perspectives. It's about focusing on understanding, not just winning.
Requires a different mindset online, doesn't it? More
Mm.
thoughtful, less reactive. Okay, let's tackle another really concerning theme Beckford raises. This idea of loyalty over law becoming dominant. She talks about a world upside down.
Yeah, the notes describe this situation where norms are just shaky.
Mm.
Things that used to be clearly out of bounds seem to become normalized. It really makes you question our collective moral compass, Where are the lines anymore?
It's unsettling when those clear boundaries seem to blur, and that creates problems when, as Beckford says, following orders gets murky.
Right. Those are the really tough spots. When your loyalty to a boss, a cause, whatever clashes directly with your own moral principles or with the actual law, the sources hint at how agonizing these conflicts can be for individuals caught in them.
That internal struggle. Do what you're told, or do what you believe is right. And if you choose dissent in a loyalty-first environment, what are the consequences for dissenters?
They can be severe, according to the sources. Losing your job, reputation damage, legal troubles, getting attacked online.
Yeah.
And it creates this chilling effect, right? Makes other people afraid to speak up, afraid to think critically.
That fear must be so corrosive inside any organization or society. And this forces us to look at the rule book of governance again. Is it becoming obsolete?
Well, that traditional rulebook transparency, accountability, constitutional values, it can seem out of step with an environment that seems to reward sensationalism and, well, absolute loyalty above all else. It raises serious questions about whether those core principles still hold sway.
A real clash between the ideal and the perceived reality. And people get caught on the loyalty tightrope, as Beckford calls it.
Constantly trying to balance that demand for loyalty with their own ethical compass, especially when powerful people demand total obedience, no questions asked, even if the orders feel wrong.
Sounds incredibly stressful and ethically fraught. How does the public react to all this? What's the public sentiment?
It's really divided, as you'd expect. You see everything from passionate support for leaders who demand loyalty to deep disillusionment and anger about perceived ethical breaches. And the media landscape often just amplifies these divisions, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You see completely different takes on the same events depending on where you look. What's the internal impact on institutions when loyalty becomes the top priority?
It can be really damaging internally. Ethical dilemmas for staff, morale plummets, talented people might leave or not even join in the first place. It can really erode the integrity and effectiveness of the institution itself.
Creates a culture where maybe speaking truth is discouraged, leading to bad decisions down the line.
Mm.
So looking forward, can we find a better balance? Is it possible?
The sources suggest it requires a really deliberate effort, a reevaluation of what we value, prioritizing integrity, respect, transparency over just blind allegiance. And crucially, leaders have to set that example. It has to come from the top.
Leaders modeling the behavior, yeah. And all this leads, maybe inevitably, to what Beckford calls cracks in the foundation, eroding trust.
Yep. When people perceive that political influence or personal loyalty matters more than fairness or the rule of law, trust in those democratic institutions just crumbles. It creates this huge gap between the governed and those governing.
And that loss of faith is so dangerous for democracy.
Yeah.
It even feels like basic democratic traditions falter in this climate.
Exactly. Things we used to take for granted, like the peaceful transfer of power, they start to feel less certain, more fragile, especially when partisan loyalty seems to override commitment to those broader institutional norms.
That's a chilling thought. But Beckford also talks about the rise of the new guard. Who are they?
These are individuals using new, often digital tactics to get involved and exert influence. They might bypass traditional media, speak directly to people, tapping into a desire for authenticity, maybe fueled by frustration with the old ways.
So potentially disruptive, but maybe bringing fresh energy or ideas. And what about hearing voices from the heartland?
This is about recognizing the perspectives from communities often overlooked in the national media narrative. They offer really important insights into the challenges people face, their views on democracy, often showing incredible resilience, too.
And a vital reminder not to just focus on the coastal bubbles, right?
Hmm.
That fundamental divide, the left versus the right, seems wider than ever.
Yeah, the worldviews often seem fundamentally opposed. And echo chambers, online and off, just reinforce those divisions, making finding common ground, let alone bipartisan solutions, incredibly tough.
Feels like two different realities sometimes. And the system's checks and balances are under strain too.
Definitely. That separation of powers gets tested when polarization is extreme. Party loyalty can sometimes seem to trump constitutional duty, weakening those essential checks.
Which raises big questions about the system's health. And with all the talk of disinformation, it makes you wonder, every vote matters, or does it?
Despite all the challenges, the misinformation, the attempts to suppress votes, the sources really stress that civic engagement. And yeah, every single vote is still absolutely critical. It's the bedrock of democratic legitimacy.
So, individual action still counts, even with all the noise. But speaking truth to power must be incredibly hard in a loyalty-driven environment.
It can be risky, for sure, challenging the status quo, challenging powerful people, but the sources emphasize it's essential for a healthy democracy. It takes courage, and we need those diverse, critical voices, even if they're uncomfortable.
Highlights the bravery required sometimes. So how do we start rebuilding for tomorrow? What's the path forward?
It seems to be about multiple things working together. Fostering unity somehow, more transparency, promoting critical thinking and media literacy is huge. Encouraging actual dialogue, respectful dialogue, and empowering the next generation to be active participants.
Sounds like a long-term project, needing effort from everyone. Is this moment a real turning point or just a bump in the road for democracy?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's hard to know if this is a permanent shift or a really rough patch we can get through. It forces us to really think about how resilient our democratic systems actually are.
Only time will tell, I suppose. But Beckford ends this section with some hope in the horizon. What's the basis for that hope?
She suggests that navigating this requires us to really reevaluate things, commit again to transparency, foster that critical thinking, encourage dialogue, and just hold firm to those core democratic values. The potential for positive change is still there.
A reminder that it's not all doom and gloom, that agency still exists. Okay, let's shift to a really sharp point raised in the sources. The question, justice or just us?
Yeah, that's a powerful phrase. It gets right to the core. Is the legal system impartial, fair for everyone, or is it being bent by politics, serving only certain interests?
A fundamental question about fairness. The sources mention the Secretary of Loyalty. What does that represent?
It's depicted as this influential figure, maybe within the Justice Department, whose main loyalty isn't to the law itself, but to a person or an agenda. And that person could potentially steer investigations, prosecutions based on those loyalties.
A huge potential conflict of interest right at the top. And there are hints about politically motivated investigations, like, let's tweak those investigations, shall we?
The sources suggest concerns that political factors might improperly influence which cases get pursued, how aggressively what outcomes are sought, raising serious doubts about equal justice and the potential weaponization of the legal system.
Undermines the whole idea of blind justice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And friends in high places seems relevant here, too.
According to the sources, yeah. Connections and influence could potentially shield some people from scrutiny, while others face the full force of the law. It creates this risk of a two-tiered justice system where who you know matters more than what you did.
Creates a deep sense of unfairness,
Yeah.
eroding faith in the process. And when the law gets manipulated like that, it's like taking the law for a ride.
Exactly. The sources describe how the legal system itself can be exploited for personal or political advantage, and that just eats away at public trust, undermining the core principles of fairness and accountability the law is supposed to stand for.
A really dangerous path for the rule of law. Then there's the mention of enemies lists and blacklists. What's their purpose?
They're portrayed as tools to target opponents, monitoring them, handicapping them, based on ideology or perceived disloyalty. It's about stifling dissent, chilling free thought.
It has a real authoritarian feel to it. But there's also hope in a few good allies.
Yeah, these are depicted as the brave people inside the system who resist that loyalty over law culture, people who stand up for justice and integrity even when it's risky for them personally or professionally.
Sounds like crucial figures holding the line. But you have to wonder, in this kind of environment, how effective is public outcry anymore?
That's a tough one. The sources suggest its power might be diminished. Polarization means people interpret things differently. Misinformation confuses the issue. Echo chambers limit how much unified sentiment can build. It seems harder for public pressure to really force accountability.
Like the noise just drowns out the calls for change sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's tackle electoral disinformation described as a modern weapon. Beckford paints a picture of a disinformation wonderland. What's that like?
It's this landscape where fabricated stories, misleading narratives, outright lies are deliberately spread to manipulate voters and election outcomes. The line between fact and fiction gets totally blurred, breeding confusion and distrust.
A deliberate effort to mess with people's heads and influence votes. And we have fake news factories contributing to this.
Right. These operations just churn out false or misleading content, often for profit via clicks, but also deliberately to sway opinions and undermine trust in real news sources and the democratic process itself.
It's insidious, really. And social media is the double-edged sword here.
Totally. Amazing for connection and sharing ideas, but also the perfect breeding ground for disinformation to spread like crazy. The very things that make it powerful also make it vulnerable to manipulation and these echo chambers we keep talking about.
So easy to exploit. And even things like meme warfare and viral sensations are part of this.
Yeah, memes might seem harmless, but they can be used strategically to distort reality, amplify divisive messages, and spread narratives really quickly, often bypassing critical scrutiny because they're presented as humor.
Amazing how internet culture gets weaponized. And now we have the art of deepfakes and misleading videos.
That's really scary stuff, creating realistic but totally fake audio and video. It makes it incredibly hard to know what's real anymore. A huge threat to trust and potentially to electoral integrity if people can be so easily fooled.
Blurs reality itself. And it's not always high-tech. Sometimes it's just plain old half-truths to full-blown lies.
Right. Disinformation campaigns use a whole range of tactics, from subtle distortions and taking things out of context to just making stuff up entirely. The goal is always to sow doubt, confuse people, and erode faith in the process.
What's the actual impact of disinformation on voters' minds?
It can cause confusion, definitely. Increase skepticism about all information sources, lead to apathy, like why bother voting if it's all lies?
Hmm.
And it deepens mistrust in democratic institutions. Plus, it fuels polarization by reinforcing biases.
Really attacks the foundations of an informed electorate, crucial for democracy. So what's being done? Beckford mentions fact-checkers to the rescue.
Fact checkers play a really crucial role, trying to debunk the lies, verify information, promote media literacy. They're like a defense line against the flood of misinformation, trying to inject some factual grounding back into the conversation.
A vital service, for sure. What are the main lessons learned for protecting electoral integrity in this new age?
It needs a multi-pronged approach. Big focus on media literacy and critical thinking for everyone. More transparency in campaigns and online platforms. Strong support for independent fact-checking. And collaboration between tech companies, government, civil society to tackle it.
A big ongoing effort needed on many fronts. Okay, lastly, let's look at the power of populist narratives.
Yeah.
How do leaders tap into this?
Populist leaders often connect by voicing frustrations people feel with the economy, with elites, whatever. They use that us versus them language, positioning themselves as the voice of the real people against some perceived enemy. Emotional stories, simple solutions to complex problems, that builds intense loyalty.
Creating that strong in-group feeling, and this often happens in echo chambers and rally cries.
Exactly. Online groups, physical rallies. These spaces reinforce the message, shield people from counter-arguments. Populist rhetoric gets amplified, group identity strengthens, and people get mobilized around the leader or the cause.
Creates a very reinforcing environment. And conspiracy theories apparently become a top seller here. Why do they take hold?
They offer simple answers to complex, scary things. In a climate of distrust, they provide this sense of having secret knowledge, of understanding what's really going on. It can be appealing if you feel powerless or ignored by the mainstream.
Feels a need for certainty, maybe, even if it's based on falsehoods. And some people are suspicion spreaders extraordinaire.
Yeah, individuals or groups who actively try to sow doubt about institutions, experts, facts. By creating this cloud of uncertainty, they make people more receptive to conspiracy theories and populist claims.
And the mix of fear and fantasy is particularly potent.
Definitely. Manipulating people's fears while offering these often simplistic or fantastical narratives that can lead to irrational thinking, social division, even extremism. It's a dangerous combination.
Has real-world consequences. And there are efforts at recasting reality, rewriting the narrative.
Constantly. Efforts to distort facts, promote alternative versions of events, reshape how people see things to fit a certain agenda. It's about controlling the story, undermining objective truth.
And social media is the megaphone for all this.
Absolutely. It amplifies these movements, these theories, creates the echo chambers, helps mobilize supporters on a massive scale, far faster and wider than ever before.
The speed and scale are key. And this is where fact meets fiction, blurring boundaries.
Yeah, deliberate lies are often dressed up to look like real information, making it harder and harder to tell the difference. That erodes trust across the board and makes informed debate almost impossible.
Challenges our basic ability to agree on reality. And this isn't just local, it's globally local.
Right. Populism, conspiracy theories, you see similar patterns playing out worldwide. It taps into universal human psychology, social dynamics, and digital platforms connect these trends globally.
A truly worldwide phenomena. So what's the way forward? How do we find equilibrium?
It seems to come back to individual responsibility seeking diverse, credible info, promoting media literacy and critical thinking across society, more global cooperation on things like disinformation, and fundamentally a renewed commitment to democratic values, transparency, accountability, respect for truth.
A huge challenge requiring effort at every level. Wow. This deep dive into Alison Beckford's The Rogue President and those April notes, it really lays out some massive shifts and challenges we're facing.
It really does. From the erosion of trust, the impact of digital life, that tension between loyalty and law. There's so much to unpack and think about in these sources.
We really hope this exploration gave you, our listeners, a clearer picture of these complex issues, maybe sparked a few aha moments along the way.
And if you did find this valuable, please do hit like, subscribe, and share Allison Knows on Spotify and YouTube. It helps others find these discussions, and we'd love for you to join our ongoing conversations.
Definitely. Maybe take a second now to think.
Yeah.
What stood out most to you from all this? What questions pop into your head? Anything you want to dig into more yourself?
Yeah, what's the one thing that really sticks with you?
And here's a final thought to leave you with. In this world where fact and fiction seem increasingly tangled, what's one concrete thing each of us could do, starting today, to contribute to a more informed, more truthful public conversation? Thank you so much for listening to the Allison Knows podcast. Follow Allison on Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok.